I should be telling a story if I said she was beautiful, she thought, and I should know I was telling a story. I believe I am as ugly as she is, in my way. What did she say that for? After she had known Miss Minchin longer than she learned why she had said it, she discovered that she said the same thing to each papa and mamma who brought a child to a school. Sarah stood near her father and listened while Miss Minchin talked. She had been brought up to the seminary because Lady Meredith's 2 little girls had been educated there, and Captain Crewe had great respect for Lady Meredith's experience. Sarah was to be what was known as a parlour boarder, and she was to enjoy even greater privileges than the parlour boarders usually did. She was to have a pretty bedroom and a sitting room of her own. She was to have a pony and a carriage, and a maid to take the place of the ayah who had been her nurse in India. I am not in the least anxious about her education, Captain Crewe said, with his gay laugh as he held Sarah's hand and patted it. The difficulty will be to keep her from learning too fast and too much. She is always sitting with her little nose burrowed into books. She doesn't read them, Miss Minchin. She gobbles them up as if she were a little wolf instead of a little girl. She is always starving for new books to gobble, and she wants grown-up books, great, big, fat ones, French and German as well as English, history and biography and poets and all sorts of things. Drag her away from her books when she reads too much, make her ride her pony in the row, or go out and buy a new doll. She ought to play more with dolls. Papa, said Sarah, you see, if I went out and bought a doll every few weeks, I should have more than I could be fond of. Dolls ought to be intimate friends. Emily is going to be my intimate friend. Captain Crewe looked at Miss Minchin, and Miss Minchin looked at Captain Crewe. Who is Emily? She inquired. Tell her, Sarah, Captain Crewe said, smiling. Sarah's green-grey eyes looked very solemn and quite soft as she answered. She is the doll I haven't got yet, she said. She is a doll Papa is going to buy for me. We are going out together to find her. I have called her Emily. She is going to be my friend when Papa is gone. I want her to talk to him. Miss Minchin's large, fishy smile became very flattering indeed. What an original child, she said. What a darling little creature. Yes, said Captain Crewe, drawing Sarah close. She is a darling little creature. Take great care of her for me, Miss Minchin. Sarah stayed with her father in his hotel for several days. In fact, she remained with him until he sailed away again to India. They went out and visited many big shops together and bought a great many things. They bought, indeed, a great many more things than Sarah needed, but Captain Crewe was a rash, innocent young man, and wanted his little girl to have everything she admired and everything he admired himself, so between them they had collected a wardrobe much too grand for a child of 7. There were velvet dresses trimmed with costly furs, and lace dresses and embroidered ones, and hats with great soft ostrich feathers, and ermine coats and muffs, and boxes of tiny gloves and handkerchiefs, and silk stockings in such abundant supplies that the polite young women behind the counters whispered to each other that the odd little girl with the big solemn eyes must be at least some foreign princess, perhaps the little daughter of an Indian Rajah. And at last they found Emily, but they went to a number of toy shops and looked at a great many dolls before they discovered her. I want her to look as if she wasn't a doll really, Sarah said. I want her to look as if she listens when I talk to her. The troubles with dolls, Papa, and she put her little head on the side and reflected as she said it. The troubles with dolls is that they never seem to hear. So they looked at the big ones and the little ones, at dolls with black eyes and dolls with blue, at dolls with brown curls and dolls with golden braids, dolls dressed and dolls undressed. You see, Sarah said when they were examining one who had no clothes, if, when I find her, she has no frocks, we can take her to a dressmaker and have things made to fit. They will fit better if they are tried on. After a number of disappointments, they decided to walk and look in a shop window and let the cab follow them. They had passed 2 or 3 places without even going in, when, as they were approaching a shop which was really not a very large one, Sarah suddenly pointed and clutched her father's arm. "Oh, Papa," she cried, "there's Emily." A flush had risen into her face, and there was an expression in her green-grey eyes as if she had just recognized someone she was intimate with and fond of. "She is actually waiting there for us," she said. "Let us go to her." "Dear me, Captain Crewe, sauce. You must introduce me, and I will introduce you, said Sarah. But I know her the minute I saw her, so perhaps she knew me too. Perhaps she had known her. She had certainly a very intelligent expression in her eyes when Sarah took her into her arms. She was a large doll, but not too large to carry about easily. She had a naturally curling, golden brown hair, which hung like a mantle about her, and her eyes were a deep, clear grey blue, with soft, thick eyelashes, which were real eyelashes and not mere painted lines. Of course, said Sarah, looking into her face as she held her on her knee. Of course, Papa, this is Emily. So Emily was bought and actually taken to a children's outfitter's shop and measured for a wardrobe as grand as Sarah's own. She had lace frocks too, a velvet and muslin ones, and hats and coats and beautiful lace-trimmed underclothes and gloves and handkerchiefs and furs. I should like her always to look as if she were a child with a good mother, said Sarah. And I'm her mother, though I am going to make a companion of her. Captain Crewe would really have enjoyed the shopping tremendously, but that a sad thought kept tugging at his heart. This all meant that he was going to be separated from his beloved, quaint little comrade. He got out of his bed in the middle of that night and went and stood looking down at Sarah, who lay asleep with Emily in her arms. Her black hair was spread out on the pillow, and Emily's golden brown hair mingled with it. Both of them had lace-ruffled nightgowns, and both had long eyelashes which lay and curled upon their cheeks. Emily looked so like a real child that Captain Crewe felt glad she was there. He drew a big sigh and pulled his mustache with a boyish expression. "Hi-ho, little Sarah," he said to himself. "I don't believe you know how much your daddy will miss you." The next day he took her to Miss Minchin's and left her there. He was to sail away that next morning. He explained to Miss Minchin that his solicitors, Messrs. Sparrow and Skipworth, had charge of his affairs in England and would give her any advice she wanted, and that they would pay the bills she sent in Sarah's expenses. He would write to Sarah twice a week, and she was to be given every pleasure that she asked for. "She is a sensible little thing, and she never wants anything that isn't safe to give her," he said. Then he went with Sarah into her little sitting room, and they bade each other goodbye. Sarah sat on his knee and held the lapels of his coat in her small hands, and looked long and hard into his face. "Are you learning me by heart, little Sarah?" he said, stroking her hair. "No," she answered. "I know you by heart. You are inside my heart." And they put their arms around each other and kissed as if they would never let go. When the cab drove away from the door, Sarah was sitting on the floor of her sitting room with her hands under her chin and her eyes following it until it had turned the corner of the square. Emily was sitting by her, and she looked after it too. When Miss Minchin sent her sister, Miss Amelia, to see what the child was doing, she found she could not open the door. "I have locked it," said a queer, polite little voice from inside. "I want to be quite by myself, if you please." Miss Amelia was a fat, dumpy, and stood very much in awe of her sister. She was really the better-natured person of the two, but she never disobeyed Miss Minchin. She went downstairs again, looking almost alarmed. "I never saw such a funny, old-fashioned child, sister," she said. "She has locked herself in, and she is not making the least particle of noise." "It is much better than if she kicked and screamed, as some of them do," Miss Minchin answered. "I expected that a child as much spoiled as she is would set the whole house in an uproar. If ever a child was given her own way in everything, she is." "I've been opening her trunks and putting her things away," said Miss Amelia. "I never saw anything like them, sable and ermine on her coats, and real Valenciennes lace on her underclothing. You have seen some of her clothes. What do you think of her?" "I think they are perfectly ridiculous," said Miss Minchin sharply. "But they will look very well at the head of the line when we take the school children to church on Sunday. She has been provided for as if she were a